Welcome to Help, I'm a Parent, Christian Parenting in the Real World. We're your hosts, Doctors Claudio and Pamela Consuegra, and together we serve as the Directors of Family Ministries for the North American Division of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Today we will be discussing the many stigmas that surround mental health issues. It's time that we stop burying our heads in the sand and start looking at it as we do other illnesses. We do not hesitate to take our children to a physician if we suspect an ear infection, a strep throat, or they have a broken bone. And yet, when it comes to their mental health, we're prone to look the other way, ignore it, or pray that it will go away on its own. The purpose of our conversation today is to understand the reality of the issues that surround the mental health of our teens, explore the warning signs, and review some steps that we may take to assist them.
We're delighted today to be joined by Dr. Julian Melgosa. He is a licensed educational psychologist in the United Kingdom and has worked extensively with adolescents, families, and adults, and currently serves as the Associate Education Director for the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Dr. Melgosa, we're delighted to have you with us today.
A pleasure to be here.
We want to have this conversation about the mental health of adolescents, but before we do, I'd like us to listen to what some parents had to say about their own adolescence.
I had a situation with my own daughter. A friend of hers had written a letter to her telling her how much she just hates her life and how ugly she looks and how she doesn't want to live here anymore and that she just wants to die. And reading that letter, the note, my daughter did share it with me because she was like, it's beyond me, which I'm so glad and thankful that my daughter did that. And when I read the note, I would have never suspected a child, a teenager, to even think that way. I would have never expected my own child to think that way.
Yeah, and it's just interesting because at school, there's so much of the bullying, and kids come home and they're afraid to say anything, but as you just talk to your kids and you find out that there's so much happening when they enter that classroom.
Right.
And we have to be aware of it, really, really aware of it, yeah.
What I see so much is that they are so pressured to dress a certain way and to look a certain way. And our daughter is constantly pushing the boundaries or overstepping by sneaking out the house and wearing or dressing some way that we know what that is saying. And I think that they don't feel accepted unless they have the appearance. And then we throw in the internet and it's just kind of snowballs, I think.
Yeah, I think that whole thing of, when you're a teenager, it's everything to fit in, right? And I remember, it wasn't that long ago that I was a teenager. I don't think it was that long ago. And I remember, I wanted to fit in, I wanted to be able to hang with the guys, and I definitely wanted to be able to hang with the girls, right? And it was hard enough in my little school. But now every kid has to compete with 20 million other kids online with stuff that's real or not real. And I can't imagine how much pressure that must put on them, because I remember how much I had when I was a teenager.
Dr. Melgosa, as a psychologist, it's important for us to help our parents understand about those transitional years. Our kids at the age of 10, 11, 12 suddenly became totally different. What are some of those changes the mental changes anyways, that our adolescents are going through?
Well, the mental changes come as a result of the physical changes, and of course the attitude, the outlook will differ. Some of them apparently change personalities whenever they get to be 12, 13 and starting interacting with their friends. Some of the things that we will observe are a sense of autonomy, wanting to do the way they want to do things in dressing, like it was mentioned.
Wanting some independence from the parents.
Yes, and we as parents have to be careful to grant some of that, to keep a short leash, but to let go as well, because that's part of our mission in the family setting. So we need to be there to listen. We need to remember that they are not going to be always ready to be told what they have to do. Lectures tend to work very poorly with adolescents or with some of them. There are all kinds.
Don't preach. Don't serve.
Very little of that. Very little. Yes. Yes.
So one of the concerns that many parents have expressed to us anyways is what effect is technology, especially social media, having it on that brain development of our kids. You're talking about letting them be a little bit more autonomous, more independent. At the same time, the brain, as I understand, is not completely developed at that age. So what effect is social media and this electronic media that we're so dependent on, what effect is that having on the adolescent mind?
To me, the most important effect has to do with social skills. They miss a great deal of the practice that we all need, especially at that age as they are becoming adults, to relate to people, to be able to look at the face of people, to show smiles, to be listening to people, to get nuances that only happen in human communication when we are face to face. They miss a lot of that, and I don't know what is going to happen with this generation, but it's going to be a very limited generation in terms of social skills, and I think that's something that has to be remembered, to channel, to limit. We cannot take away the device, but we can agree. In fact, there are some psychological contracts in the counseling rooms to guide parents into drawing a contract with the kid, stating for how many hours they are going to do and when are they going to say no, and the parents are allowed to take away in moments and so on. These things are agreed prior to the crisis, and things like that can help manage these devices.
And it almost seems like a great irony, because here in today's world, our children are growing up in a world unknown to us regarding this whole topic of media. And yet it's very interesting what you said, because in the area of social media, where they have the ability and the capacity to interact with people all over the world at the touch of the button, here you're saying that ability has actually eroded their social skills.
Yes,
so
that is correct.
it's a very interesting concept. Something that should be opening up a new world for them has closed down.
And that's why the parents have to make purpose of changing that trend and agree with the teenagers on times that the family are going to be interacting. They are going to put aside the device and they are going to talk to each other. And if that is part of a plan that has been laid out, then the adolescents tend to be much less resistant, because they will know that at that time we have a family time and we have agreed on that, and sometimes we have signed this contract, and the parent commit themselves to do their part, the children commit themselves to do their part.
One of the parents was talking about the concern about her daughter or her daughter's friend and her poor self-image, which evidently was leading her to maybe even consider ending her life. So during this transitional years, adolescents are beginning to think differently about themselves. Who has the greatest potential or the greatest effect on their developing self-image?
The outside world in general. We all develop our self-image as a result of the feedback that we get from people, sometimes through looks or sometimes through words, sometimes through written messages or incidental messages that people talk about us to other person, and that's how we build up. Adolescence is a time when this is built the most and when they are most sensitive about self-esteem. So that's when they need a great deal of positive, encouraging, affirming messages about their own, not just only their looks, because that is just one small part, but about their abilities, their skills, their character, the way they portray their personality onto others. Little comments here and there, sometimes without giving much importance of sitting them down to tell them how good you are. Rather relaxed, incidental, that is said in passing, that has a lot of effect on the self-esteem.
So it sounds to me then, Dr. Melgosa, that it may seem silly to say it because it's so natural, it should be so natural, but the words and the actions of the parent or the child can play an extremely important
Absolutely,
role.
absolutely. Just a little expression, oh, that's stupid, that can hurt an adolescent tremendously.
And yet, you know, we've talked about how social media is damaging and very detrimental in many cases to the mental health of our young people. As a parent, I'm often not even aware of the conversations my child is having online. I'm not aware that there's cyberbullying, that they're being exposed to some of these things.
Yeah.
What are some things that I can look for in my child that may indicate that I need to be more involved, that something deeper is going on here than just a normal transition through adolescence?
Radical changes in behavior are important to look at because these may be associated to some cyberbullying, some harassing that goes online quite a bit. Children these days and adolescents have gotten accustomed to get pleasure and get pain through the messages and through the comments that they see there. When some of these kids go through some painful situation, they may change their behavior. Another thing is if they get angry whenever it's time to put aside the device, whenever they don't want to respond and they really get angry. Those are bad signs. Those are bad signs about this. This is a time to sit down and to have a very good conversation about how we are going to channel this. I don't think it's healthy unless there is a very radical situation to take away completely, but to rationalize, to organize the time so that certain amount of use is permitted, but there are times that is not permitted, and the exercise of that self-control of yes, now, and now, no, is a healthy thing for the teenager.
And you talk about the drastic changes. So, for instance, they're sleeping too much or not sleeping enough.
Right. They are not talking whenever they used to talk a lot. They are seeking new companies. New friends are coming. They are failing in school. That's a very, very alarming. With some that has been getting good grades, all of a sudden, you know, poor grades in all subjects. Oh, be careful. This is one of the things that we have to stop and see what's going on here.
So now you can tell because of those drastic changes that your child could be suffering from something like depression.
Yes.
What should you as a parent do? Just talk to them, or is there more than they should be doing?
Well, there are two levels there. There is just the normal, you know, sadness that a kid experiences from a disappointment with a friend or whatever. Yeah. Then there is the clinical depression that has a whole array of symptoms that last for more than 2 weeks, and they stay for the whole day, really. Things that have to do with the mood, with being very sad or not having motivation to do things that they normally like to do. And then issues that have to do with intake, eating too much, eating too little, sleeping badly, sleeping too much, sleeping too little, retardation in the motion or being hyperactive, thinking process problems like not remembering, not reasoning out, being unable to really concentrate on things that have to do with school, and ultimately, and very important, when there are thoughts of death, as we have seen, when kids express, oh, there's no solution, I cannot do anything, this is the end, or even they will say, I want to die. That's a very, very serious warning. We have to do something about it.
Yeah, and that's a very long list, and it's important that we remember it. But we want to continue this conversation talking about not only depression, but other changes in the mental health of our adolescents. So when we come back after this pause, we'll continue talking with Dr. Melgosa about what happens in the mind of a child and what things we need to be aware of as parents. So come back after the break.
You can probably already tell that we will not be able to cover every area, every concern, or every question you may have in the short time that we have together. Parenting will continue to produce new challenges and new questions every day. As our children grow and change, so will the parenting challenges that we will face.
Therefore, our goal is to continue this conversation with up-to-date resources and practical parenting tips online via our website, helpimaparent.org. There you may keep updated on our newly released parenting resources, supplemental products, and find additional material for free download. You're also invited to subscribe to an electronic newsletter, read a blog just for parents, and much more.
In addition to that website, we have a Facebook page where we post daily words of encouragement and resources. So look us up. Help, I'm a Parent. And remember to share that Facebook post with the friends in your own social network.
It is our desire that this resource will assist you in your God-given role as a parent by using principles that are firmly grounded in the Word of God. Now let's get back to our conversation with today's guests. Thank you for joining us again as we continue the conversation with Dr. Melgosa about the mental health of adolescents. Dr. Melgosa, before the break, you were giving us a number of the symptoms of depression. Now, you're a psychologist, I'm a psychologist. We recognize the symptoms, the length of time, etc. But for a parent who is not a psychologist, they see that there are some changes. For instance, they're sleeping too much, they're not sleeping enough, they're eating too much, not eating enough, etc., etc. What should they do to intervene at that time? And I had asked the question, is it enough to just talk to your adolescent, or what else should they be doing immediately?
Well, when those signs are present, they must be taken very seriously. And this is the time to talk to the child, to tell them that we are going to go to the doctor. We have to remove the halo of mystery that there is around mental health, and think of mental health as we think of physical health as well. We go to the doctor, and in fact, the family doctor is the best way to start, because we may not know a psychiatrist, but then we know the doctor, and the doctor will refer us to the right kind of psychiatrist.
Or it could be a chemical imbalance that's causing the depression, and so the doctor would
there
be the
is
one
always
to
medical imbalance. There are different changes in the chemistry of the brain.
Sure.
Sometimes they are very pronounced and they really require pharmacological treatment. Other times it's a small one. But whenever we act, there is something that is happening in our brain, even in healthy people. Whenever someone does exercise, there are a number of neurotransmitters that get in abundance just because of that. So there is chemistry, and especially in the area of depression, there is chemistry, yes.
So for someone, a parent who might say, oh, if there's something wrong with my child mentally, that's embarrassing.
That's right.
Well, the first step is to go to the doctor, because we go to the doctor for many reasons. But even if it is more than just a chemical imbalance, more than a physical, something that's bothering physically, if they need to go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, why should they be embarrassed?
Yes, there is no reason to be embarrassed. That is something there are symptoms that people have. And fortunately, these days, more and more people are saying, yes, my daughter was diagnosed with major depression, and she is in the treatment, and so on. Remember that there are 3 pillars in the treatment. One is pharmacological. That is the first one that is used to stabilize the patient.
Yes.
Okay.
The second one is psychotherapeutic in the terms to follow some sort of counseling because that is what
conversation with a counselor, psychologist, a therapist,
will take care of the problem in the long run. And then there is lifestyle. Lifestyle has to do with the way we think, the way we sleep, the way we eat, the healthy habits, especially in thinking, that people don't know much, looking at things in a positive manner, look for activities that are humorous, do things that are fun, relate to people that are healthy mentally. Those are very good things.
So the 3 pillars again, you said?
Pharmacological,
medication,
counseling, and lifestyle.
I loved your previous comment, suggesting to our parents that the first stop is the family physician. Because I think all too often we think, where do we go? I'm noticing some signs in my child that suggest that maybe they need some outside help, but I don't know where to go. So that's a fabulous suggestion. Go to your family physician.
And that helps me as a parent to understand, again, that this is not something to be ashamed of.
Right.
If my child has a bad headache or a broken bone, I wouldn't say, oh, this is embarrassing to take him to the doctor. But there is a time when that depression gets worse, or they begin to verbalize maybe their desire to end their life. And one of the concerns that some parents have is, well, I think they may be thinking about it, but I don't want to say it because I may be planting thoughts in their mind. So when it comes to suicide, Dr. Melgosa, how seriously should parents take it, and what should they do if they suspect it?
Very serious. There are a lot of lives that can be saved whenever this is taken seriously. That means listening to them and talking to them. There is nothing to be ashamed about talking of what goes in your mind. Are you thinking about even taking your life?
Right.
This is perfectly all right. In fact, part of the treatment of someone who is suicidal is to verbalize and to talk about what they feel and to talk about what they are even planning to do, and to be constantly under surveillance. A suicidal adolescent cannot be left alone. And of course, it has to be taken to the doctor. Sometimes, in some cases, they have to be taken to a hospital and have to be admitted into hospital. But never ignore a sign like that.
So that's important, because one of the biggest myths of suicide is if I, as a parent, approach my child and say, are you thinking of taking your own life? That I have just planted the thought.
No,
and what I'm hearing, you have debunked
you are opening
that
the door to dialogue, and that's very important.
Right.
You should never think that you are giving ideas. The ideas, we don't have to give them. They have the ideas already.
Very true.
It's good to talk.
Yeah. You know, for those of us who live in this area, recently I heard the story of a young man. It shocked me because he was 12 years old, who jumped off a bridge and landed on a car. Now, his intent was to commit suicide. He survived. The young lady that was driving the car was killed. So it's tragic for many different reasons. My concern, Dr. Melgosa, is that we sometimes think of maybe the older adolescents thinking about ending their life because of peer pressure or whatever. But when I hear of a young man the age of 12 thinking about that, that tells me that it's not too early to have those conversations with our children.
Yes.
Yeah. So as a parent, again, what specific words should I use? Are you thinking of committing suicide, or is that too big a word to use? Or what would you say?
A question like that is perfectly appropriate. I think it doesn't have to be the very first question. I think the first probing would be, tell me about what goes in your head. When you are worried, what are you thinking about? The other day you said, this is the end, there's no exit, there's no way out. What are you feeling? And then whenever the child starts talking more, we can ask directly the question, have you had thoughts of death? Have you thought about taking your life, just like, or hurting yourself?
Yeah.
Very appropriate question.
And if they were to say, yes, I have been thinking about that, then what would be the follow-up?
Then we understand it's a very serious matter, and we need to seek help. We need to start saying, well, we are going to talk to a counselor or talk to the family physician to see what we can do, because you may be able to take some medicine that it will quiet these thoughts down, and then we start counseling. And that is
Do I make this optional for my child, Dr. Melgosa, as a parent?
It cannot be optional. This is a treatment that is required because their lives is at risk.
Right.
So I have been a police chaplain too, a law enforcement chaplain, and there have been times when the police has to be called in because the child might say, I'm not going, I refuse to go, but you know it's imminent, it's important that you do something, so sometimes you even have to get the officials, the law enforcement officials involved to take him to a facility where they receive the treatment. It's that serious.
It is that serious. Now, it is not always necessary to use force. Most times people can be persuaded and talked into it, and you know, the teenager, even in those moments, they keep their mental balance, their reasoning, and they just eventually yield and say, okay, let's do it. But yes, you know, especially if there has been talks about very often or an attempt to commit suicide, we cannot say, oh, let's ignore it because what he is trying is to call the attention. We do that to a toddler, you know, that is trying to manipulate us. We ignore him, but you don't ignore a teenager. in anything, especially in things that have to do with suicide.
And this whole topic really emphasizes the importance of staying connected with our
Exactly.
children. With, you know, if we're noticing that they're in the room and the door's closed all the time after school, and that's just the way they are. That's just a teenager.
Yeah.
That
It's a phase they're going
right.
through.
We can't think that, but we need to be actively involved and engaged,
Yes.
talking with them about their successes, but also their challenges and their feelings about things.
If we're not used to talking to our kids and then suddenly have the conversation
Yeah.
That
about
is
it,
a problem. We have to be friends with them before they accept us to talk about intimate things. So we have
Right.
to be very good friends.
and so we come back around to where we began, which is the effect of media on our children. If they are constantly connected to this electronic media and the electronic tablets and phones, et cetera, and we're not maintaining that face-to-face contact with them, we may be missing those signs that they are telling us, I need help.
Absolutely right. Yes.
And what we need to emphasize then to the parents again is spend time with them, quality time with your children. Besides time, what one more thing would be an important element in a relationship between a parent and a child?
I think listening is a very important fact. Be there to listen. Listen very carefully, very attentively, find out the life of your child. It's a new being there, you have to learn about that, and talk if necessary, but primarily listen.
Listen more than you talk. That's
Yeah.
great advice.
Great advice coming from a psychologist too. So thank you so much for your ideas and your insights.
It's my pleasure to be here.
We want to thank Dr. Melgosa for taking the time to join us today. I would also like to remind you to visit our parenting website, helpimaparent.org. There you will find additional resources and materials. And we also want to invite you to join us next time on Help I'm a Parent, when we will continue the conversation about parenting teens in today's world.
But until then, God has called you to be the disciple maker of your child. It is perhaps the most important role that you will ever have. Remember, it's God's desire that we be healthy in every way, physically, spiritually, and in our mental health. It is our prayer that your home will be filled with the sweet presence of Jesus, and the hope and peace that He brings will come to you today.